Here is the longest whip that I own. It's 238 feet long. I made it myself out of rope, and I've used it to set a couple Guinness records. And also, considering that my most viewed YouTube video right now is one of me cracking this whip back in 2016, I thought it'd be fun to make a little video and talk more about it. First, I don't know why that video has so many views. It is only 17 seconds long, so all I can imagine is that YouTube's been pumping it out a lot to try to compete with TikTok. Anyway, I also just made a video with this whip and put it on my TikTok channel. But I wanted to say a bit more about it. First, let's see, which certificate am I holding? All right, so in this hand is the first time I cracked this whip. And back then it was 216 feet long. And I basically didn't have all of the part that's with tape. I just had part of the rope directly taped onto the shovel handle. And a little bit about how it's made. It is just different lengths. I'll put those down. It's just different lengths of rope spliced together, so it's like 1/4 inch nylon rope at the end. And then I did a little bit of experimentation, about back in 2006, trying to crack a 120-foot whip that I made out of different lengths of rope. And then basically I took that 120 feet and then kind of dialed in the taper. And then my dad had a 100-foot long piece of this hemp rope out of a barn, so I took that, and that ended up being basically the heaviest part of the whip. And then once it was all put together, it ended up 216 feet long, and then I cracked it. And interestingly enough, back then in 2006, the record for the longest whip for Guinness was actually a lot simpler to get, because there were only 3 rules. They were: the length of the whip cannot include the handle, the length must be measured with a steel measuring tape, and then the witness, or one of the witnesses who is witnessing the attempt, must be 30 feet away from the end and hear it crack. So that's some pretty loose rules. And related to that is that it also didn't specify that you only had to have one person touching the whip. So when I was working on this record, I talked with Joe Strain, and Joe Strain told me that he had seen the previous record holder, Chris King. And first I would like to say Chris is a great whip maker and the nicest guy you ever want to meet, and he makes a great whip. So if you ever get a Chris King whip, you are a lucky person. So Chris had the record before me, and Joe Strain told me that when he watched Chris King crack it, that Chris had someone hold the cracker and then just throw a loop overhand. And before I heard that, I was like, man, how do you even crack a whip that's over 100 feet? And then once I built the 120-foot version of this whip and used sort of this having the person hold the cracker method, it was super easy. Excuse me. So then I realized all I had to do was practice throwing a loop down a 100-foot length of heavy rope, and then that would be enough energy to get the loop to travel down the 120-foot version that I made. So that was back in 2006, and that was the very first Guinness record that I did. And then April Choi then later set that record at, I think, 232 feet. And I knew at that time that Nathan Griggs, the current record holder, was working on this record. So I thought, okay, I know he's working on it. Let me see if I can try to get this record one more time. And I was partly inspired to try it one more time because April had actually given me the whip she used for the record. It was a fire whip that she had built, and some parts of it were kind of falling apart, and it got me excited about trying the record. But when I tried using it, I could see that it was had fallen apart too much to actually be used for the record. So I decided to dig this out, and then I added this whole part here, basically an extra 22 feet that is a heavier rope still, and then I also taped a length of chain on this piece of rope to add some weight. So that's why this is all covered with athletic tape. And then so I did the record again in 2016, and by then they'd made the rules a little bit tougher in that mainly you had to have a certified surveyor measure the length with surveying equipment. You couldn't just measure it with a measuring tape. And I think now, because Nathan Griggs holds the record, they've actually changed it further where you cannot have someone hold the cracker. I think what Nathan does is he sets the whip basically on like a piece of smooth plastic, like a tarp, and then has some kind of weight on it, and then throws a loop down it, and eventually the whip pulls out from the weight, and it pops. So it's a variation on having someone hold the whip, but there are no other human hands on the whip. So I think that's become very important to Guinness. Well, that's a little bit about the longest whip that I own in my collection and that I've cracked. Maybe someday I'll just cut up little pieces of it and sell them for $1, or I should probably just give my dad back his 100-foot length of hemp barn rope, because it's probably collectible. Anyway, my name is Adam Winrich. Thanks for watching.